Hey everyone, welcome to today's product demo webinar with Clausematch. My name is Amanda Brief. I'm our US Marketing Director here at Clausematch, and I'm going to be behind the scenes as your moderator for today. Before we get started, just wanted to talk through the timeline real quickly. So the product demo will take approximately 20 minutes, and then there'll be 10 minutes for Q&A. So if you have any questions about the product or anything about Clausematch, you can put it in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. With that, I wanted to introduce my colleague, Claudia, who is our account executive here at Clausematch. She was born and raised in Montreal. However, she is located in our London office right now, and she has the local knowledge and excitement to guide and consult regulated businesses looking to implement a more mature and automated policy and procedure management program. So I'm excited to have Claudia run this demo today, and I'm going to hand it off to her.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone joining us today. Very excited to walk you through a very high-level overview of what we have to offer. Amanda, I'll ask you to just go to the next slide so I can quickly provide some context. So in today's demonstration, as we mentioned, it'll be quite high level, 20 minutes. But what I wanted to highlight is that essentially Clausematch sells two different offerings, what we refer to as the policy management module and the policy portal module. And these are offered as separate modules. And what we will be focusing on today is the policy management module. So we won't actually get into it for the sake of time and for the sake of differences. I just wanted to highlight very quickly what the main distinctions are. The policy management module is really focused on essentially answering the questions, how can we reduce the time and risk associated with policy and procedure management? So typically the people that will have licenses into this module tend to be any kind of first, second, or third lines of defense, or anyone who needs to interact with a policy or procedure between the drafting up until the approval stage. So good way to think about it as policies or documents that are pre-publication. On the other side, which we won't be looking at, just for your knowledge, the policy portal is ultimately, as you can imagine, where the published policies go for the internal employees. So this is really more focused around elements like attestations and reporting on the engagement with documents or policies. So just to highlight this distinction before I jump right in. And on that note, let us get started here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and open up, as you can see here, the Clausematch platform. So just a few things to note off of the bat. We are a cloud-based SaaS solution, so software as a solution, wherein which this is, as you can see, being currently accessed via my browser. The place I'm going to start off when we talk about policy management is the fact that you'll have the ability to either create from scratch or upload existing policies and procedures into Clausematch. Now, the reason I like to start with this element is because in either one of these scenarios, let's say I'm going to upload an existing document, I have the ability to assign a template. And we're going to start with templating as the primary functionality here. And templates, typically, we know them as something that's going to kind of enforce a look and feel, but Clausematch's templating functionality really does essentially I like to call it the version 2.0 of a template that you would expect. So more than just being able to enforce or embed a document to inherit a look and feel. In this case, I'm using our group policy template as an example here. So you can see the structure, the context of what's to be included. I think what's important to recognize is that within Clausematch's templates, you also have the ability to then assign what we refer to as the workflow, or in this case, as you can see, the stages in which these sort of documents will have to go through. So each and every template will likely have a different workflow depending on the sort of approval process it will be required to go through. So in this case, you can see we have a more complex workflow here in where there's a number of approvals and validations required. And the thing to highlight or that I want to bring to your attention is you can actually assign either an individual or a group of stakeholders within the business that need to be included in these approval processes. Now, where is this value for you? Well, essentially, typically we see organizations working in approvals through a number of different systems. So starting with a draft in whatever sort of Word document editor they're using, then having to email that document, then having to approve it through either an email workflow or having to capture that in meeting minutes, for example. Within Clausematch's system, you're able to assign these stakeholders the responsibility to approve within the system. So ultimately centralizing everything and making it really simple for anyone who does need to interact during that review and approval process to actually make that approval. Not to mention, all of these approvals are then maintained in your audit trail, which we'll see momentarily. So one thing to note is that everything you're seeing here is completely configurable, so you'll be able to edit these stages as you see fit. Now, in terms of templating, we've talked about how it enforces documents to inherit a look and feel. We've talked now about the workflows that inherit. Now, third, we're going to talk about the metadata fields that you can collect within the template. So metadata is really any sort of document data that you'll want to be able to either search through or report on down the line, which we'll equally see. But some of the more popular fields or things that I'll highlight are elements like document type. Is it a policy? Is it a procedure, for example? Review dates, which will essentially enforce all of the automation for any document owners in the coming years or weeks, for example. If you are an international organization with multiple entities in which you are maybe having amended versions of these documents, things like jurisdictions or entities. So again, these are completely configurable, and you can decide which metadata fields are the appropriate ones per template type. Now, to come out of templates and actually show you what this would look like in a document, if I were to open up my search bar here, and I'll use this as an example to highlight the group, the search capabilities as well. If I want to look up something like my group sanctions policy, oh, I'm still in my templates here. You'll notice that I can come in, I will have the term both in a abbreviated and non-abbreviated way. I will find it in the title and in the text of the document, but where these metadata fields, perfect example of come into play from a searchability standpoint, I can now look at something like document type that we saw earlier. At which point I can filter down the appropriate field, and I can become more and more granular. We want to look at things like document owner. You get the point here. You can just become very quick at finding what you're looking for and making sure that it's the right one. Now, if I were to actually open up a document and look at our global sanctions policy, this is ultimately now no longer the template, but the document that has been embedded against the template. And you can actually see this through the document settings where it has in fact been related to our group policy template. So that is why not only has it inherited the look and feel or the structure that we just saw momentarily ago, it has also inherited essentially the stages. Oh, this is my apologies. I have the wrong document here. I'm just going to find there we are. We've made this special for you. You can see it's the same policy here, but now I can actually see this one has in fact been embedded against the stages that were created earlier. We have our pre-committee approvals and the validation in which we saw. But the document has now also collected essentially the metadata fields. So things like the ones we talked about earlier, document type, document owner, etc. Jurisdiction here. So all of this to say, when we talk about a document from an auditing perspective, we mentioned how these are captured in the audit trail from an approval standpoint. You'll notice within my audit capabilities, not only can I download or export an audit report in a PDF format, I also have the ability to do so in the more commonly known way, in the docx redlined version. But what's really nice is, or what our clients give us really great feedback on, is our ability to have this overlay view in our version history. So if I bring your attention to the top right of my screen, I have my version 2.0, in which I'm able to come down, see a previous version, and through our editing capability, very, very quickly actually just identify what has actually changed or been removed or added in this document, as opposed to having to go through the entirety of it. So again, value here, saving yourself lots of time and making it very clear to your auditors what's actually been done here. Now, this is great from an overlay view, but if I want to have more granular timestamps, associations to who's been responsible for these, I can actually open up, as you see to my right, we have what's referred to as the document level activity, but we even more granularly have what's called the paragraph level activity. So very specific to Clausematch, not only are we maintaining audit trails on the document itself, we are maintaining audit trails in each and every paragraph associated within the document. So in this case, I can actually click on one of the changes and with a timestamp version, see what change was made, what was the date, and who made it. Of course, this can be further filtered through document actions or users involved. Now, coming back to the document itself, I failed to mention earlier, this is now where you're seeing Clausematch's proprietary word editor. So essentially where your users are going to be able to collaborate on documents wherever they sit in the world. This is the collaborative aspect here. And you'll notice as I come in and in this case, make a change as I'm going to do so, this is being reflected really in real time. My audit trail is being captured at the document activity level here. So if I'm someone who is either the document owner or needs to be involved in this review and approval process, everything is really simply made for me to use here. As well as approvals, this is where if and when there's an approval to be captured, where it'll show up and where the timestamp and that responsible stakeholder will be. Same thing applies to the paragraph level, in which now within my introductory paragraph, I can see what's been edited in this specific version here. I'm able to bring people in and invite on the collaboration. So if I were to tag, in this case, my colleague Jacob and say, hey, Jacob, can you have a look at the recent change? What's going to happen is Jacob's going to probably already have in his inbox an email in which he will have a link to this document, which will not only bring him to the actual document, it will bring him to this open section where he can actually see my comment and either choose to reply or resolve it on the fact. So this is when from a collaborative approach, how you can bring people into the system as opposed to having to get things out via email or via sharing different methods, making sure that we are centralizing everything into what we refer as a single source of truth for policy management. Now, one thing as well, I'll highlight now that we've seen a little bit more of the audit trail, is when we talk about the platform's capability to create relationships between documents. So essentially document mapping. And this is really in reference to regulatory risk and how we can help reduce this. So if I come down to my, what looks like kind of the chain symbol here, what we call connections, essentially within Clausematch, you have the ability to create mappings between your documents. And a typical use case is mapping, for example, a regulation down to a policy, down to a procedure, and ultimately a control, for example. And what view I have right now is what I like to call under the microscope. So in this case, I know that for a fact, this is a money laundering regulation that we've uploaded into Clausematch that is relevant to this global sanctions policy. And within this regulation, I've mapped to specific paragraphs within the regulation and mapped this to my global sanctions policy. So I can see in this scenario where these connections are live, but where this adds value for me as an organization is really in regards to keeping up to date with certain document changes that will have a downward stream impact on any others. So a very common example is making changes to a policy that might in fact have an effect or have what's the word I'm looking for, have an impact on its related procedure. So what's really nice here is that if the policy is connected to the procedure and a change is made, well, that procedure owner will be notified in real time to say, hey, this policy has changed. This may impact the procedure. But this also gives me the ability from a visibility standpoint to see where the changes are made and decide if I want to keep or now remove this connection. Now, this again is from a very kind of zoomed in close-up view. Where I want to take you is to the point or to the section in our, what we call the compliance dashboard here, where we're going to now see it from a bird's eye view. So having a much higher level of it. So within the compliance dashboard, these outputs that we're seeing here are essentially just based on the folders and the categories and documents we created on that home screen, which I'll talk about shortly. But essentially here, what you'll notice is that I have the ability to, again, create these downward streams and where I can see that money laundering regulation that we just talked about a moment ago is in fact connected to a few of my policies and procedures. If I want to take this a step further, I can see that my AML lifecycle standard is in fact connected to a number of my controls, whereas my global sanctions policy in this case is not. So this, using as an example, of course, is just really proven to highlight that you can use this as a gap analysis tool where you're asking yourself, do I have this document and it's just not connected? Or are we possibly at risk here for something? I need to create this. So really great view, really clear for yourselves, your auditors, your regulating body to see at what point you are compliant with the regulations at hand. Now, on this note, we talked about mapping a downstream relationship from, policies to procedures down to controls. What I also want to highlight, if I were to go back and open up this global sanctions policy, is the other type of relationships that we typically see our clients want to have in their documents. And that is typically a parent-child relationships between the group level policies and their amended localized versions. So if you are operating in a number of different entities and have to meet very specific requirements or obligations for those entities, what you'll notice here is at the top of this document, we have what's called modifications. So this would be considered my group level sanctions policy. But if I open this up, you can see that I have an amended version in which it is our UK version of this policy. Now, if I were to open this up, you should still be seeing on my screen here. You'll see that this is a modified view of the document. And what I can actually do is very quickly pull them side by side, but more importantly, again, quickly and efficiently see what has actually been amended or what has been changed from the group level to the localized version. So this becomes particularly powerful when you have to take into account a number of different, maybe minor or maybe more major changes within your policies to meet those localized regulations and legislation here as well. Coming back into just the home screen that we looked at earlier, I failed to mention when we talk about our categories and documents, although this looks like a very typical sort of folder structure, the value for you here or the benefit for you is the way in which Clausematch actually structures the architecture in the back end here. So what this means for you is you can likely have a AML policy that's probably going to fall into a number one of your risk taxonomy folders here. But what this means for you and for your business is that really two things. So the first thing is that Clausematch makes it actually impossible for employees to access what is not the most recent version of that policy or that procedure. So, really gone are the days of someone updating something that is maybe 2 years old accidentally and then having to go back and compare. These are really made to be in this, for the sake of better terms, dummy proof in that you can't access the wrong version or that what is not the most recent version. The other very beneficial aspect of this is that because one single file can remain in a number of different categories or folders, is that every time that document is either up for review or requires a change, those changes are reflected everywhere where it sits. So the document review only has to go through one very quick update, at which point there's no need to kind of re-upload into each and every existing folder with this new version, which is the more common way we see clients working this prior to moving over to Clausematch. Now, one of the things that I know personally a lot of clients want to see is visibility about where documents sit, what sort of approvals are remaining, what kind of review dates are upcoming. So we talk a lot about, compliance calendars, for example. And if I come into my reporting stage, I'm going to use one for the sake of time here. So one quick example in which I now have the visibility to say, we'll use the overdue approach here. So if I come into my chart view, I look at everything that's overdue, keeping in mind this is a demonstration instance, so there will be lots. Another area in which metadata becomes particularly powerful, so more than just the searching that we saw earlier, metadata now feeding into reporting capabilities, where I can scroll down not necessarily only via document type, but if I wanted to look at, as we talked about earlier, location or jurisdiction, I have a really great view or an interactive graph here in where I can actually go ahead and click on these, see what's overdue, keeping in mind that any policy or procedure that falls into this category, those document owners would have been notified in an automated way, really a number of times prior to falling into this category. So you have the ability as an organization to decide how often you want people to be reminded, if you want it to be more of a weekly digest or more of an on a per document basis, that will be completely within your remit. But what's really, I can say a lot of positive feedback we get on this reporting capability is the ability to actually visualize what's overdue, what's upcoming, and where we need to spend our time on as a compliance and governance team. So I'm mindful of the time. I know we've saved about 10 minutes for the Q&A. Amanda, do you know if we have any questions that are coming in thus far? If not, I can talk a bit more.
Yeah, no problem. So first question I got is, what type of documents can you upload to the platform? Is it only like Microsoft documents that you can upload, or is there anything else?
That is a great question. So the type of file that's going to be supported from an upload standpoint is going to be docx files. But having said that, what I can essentially show you is we do have the ability to upload or attach to your docx versions essentially any other sort of document type, whether that's PDF, whether that's Excel, for example, a PowerPoint. The main distinction here is that any sort of non-docx file cannot be opened within Clausematch itself. It's something that will then have to be, as you can see, downloaded and opened separately. But if, for example, you have a policy that's, relevant to a specific sort of training that's made available on a PowerPoint within your organization, you can make sure that that is attached to the document for your own relevance down the line.
Perfect, thank you. Another question we got was around pricing. So can you elaborate on how pricing works within Clausematch?
Absolutely. So we have a license-based pricing model in which we have 3 types of users. Within policy management, so everything we've seen today, we have 2 user types, that being the power user and the light user. Having said that, the power users are typically those that are involved in what we call the high touch approach. So they tend to be the drafters, the people that will go in and make changes, the document owners, for example. And the light users are those that have what we call the light touch approach on the opposite end. So these are typically the reviewers or the approvers, and those that can make, for example, in this case, what we call suggestions. So light users can still help in the drafting of documents. The difference is anything they will want to add or they'll want to provide as context will have to be accepted in this case by the document owner.
Perfect. And then kind of going back to the first question, in addition to documents, can you upload video files like YouTube videos?
You cannot upload the YouTube videos itself, but you can hyperlink not a problem to that specific video. It will work like any other sort of link that you're used to.
Great. That are all right now. Those are the 3 questions that just come up. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box now. But I guess for the sake of time, I know we have about 8 minutes left. Claudia, is there anything else you want to show from a Clausematch perspective?
There's always so much. These demos can take me up to an hour, really, typically. What would I want to focus on here? So if I were to talk a little bit more about the actual document itself and your ability to do some things here. One of the things as well that I'll highlight, we talked about the document activity and the paragraph activity, but something that clients really appreciate is our ability to what we call tags. And tags here is a way to theme any sort of document or connection within a document. So hence why earlier when I talked about the mappings between regulations to policies, you're probably all looking at these little colorful symbols saying, what is this? These are essentially the creation of tags here. So you can actually tag, for example, your mappings to show, are they partially compliant? Are they compliant? Are they non-compliant, for example? Other example of tags can be themes if you want to do, AML or operational themes, HR. So the tags allow you to, again, from a standpoint of searching and reporting, allows you to actually use them to very granularly find what you're looking for here.
Perfect. We're getting a couple more questions coming
Oh.
in. Cindy asks, can you review any of the admin capabilities?
So there is an administrative panel within the platform. I'm happy to send out following this, or Amanda, maybe we can work on, there's something we have in our user support guide that will talk about what that provides, but essentially the admin abilities allow you to configure elements like what sort of permissioning people are going to have in the platform, what is the frequency of communication you want any of your users here to be receiving emails from Clausematch, and what do you want essentially the configuration of the platform to look like. So I'll keep myself at that for now, but I do think it's worthwhile mentioning. I know we have other questions, but I do want to mention that another really big value add to working with Clausematch is within the implementation and the onboarding, you would actually be working with Clausematch's professional services team. So we really take it upon ourselves to do all of the heavy lifting in terms of making sure you get set up so you're not really left on your own, or it's not a self-serve platform in that sense. The idea is that we will make sure that everything is configured to your liking. We will train you on how to use the platform. So moving forward, you're not reliant on Clausematch to make changes, but that you're not spending an ample amount of time getting set up in the process.
Great. And then we've got another question coming in from Julian. He asks, is there a max number of reviewers that can access the document at once?
There is no max. You have the ability within a document here. Actually, I'll show you this. So every document on an individual level has what we call permission-based access. So you can select how many people you want on the document and assign their roles accordingly. So we have owners, editors, reviewers, and read released here as well.
Perfect. Thank you. And the last question just around, will we send this recording after this demo webinar is over? And yes, we'll be sending out a follow-up email to all attendees no later than tomorrow afternoon. Great. All right. I know we have 5 minutes left. Any kind of closing thoughts, Claudia, that you want to share to the audience right now?
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course, get in touch if you'd like to see something a little bit more tailored and a little bit more specific to your organization. We have lots of account executives in the business that specialize in a specific vertical. So we're ready to support you in some more personalized demos. I'll also mention, of course, it is Q4. So there are lots of incentives to take advantage of from a budgeting perspective, if this is something that you are looking to prioritize within the end of the year. So to keep that in mind, but happy to even have any sort of more exploratory conversations with anyone who may be on the fence about what this could do for their business.
Great. Thank you, Claudia. And I did send a link out. If you do want a personalized call with Clausematch, you can use that link to book time now. But with that, I want to thank Claudia for running through this demo. It's been super informative and helpful. And I want to thank each of you for attending. If you have any follow-up questions, you can send an email to us at evolve@clausematch.com. Or like I said, you can use that link in the chat to book a customized call with us now. So with that, we're going to conclude today's webinar. Look out for a follow-up email from us tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.